Hi everyone, this is a short screencast for Independent Colleges Dublin for CIMA E2 on the issue of competitors and competitor analysis. Now draw your attention to question 1 of May 2010 on CIMA's website. And what we have here is a fairly short scenario. We're just asked to sort of explain why a company should undertake competitor analysis. Quite a nice little question. 2 parts. They link the competitor analysis into market share and market growth in the second part, part B. Okay, so in terms of the scenario, really we're just dealing with an individual who is concerned with assessing a company's competitive position, and has been surprised by the lack of information available and the lack of knowledge within this particular company on this issue of competitor analysis and why it should be done, how it links into those areas of share and indeed market growth. Okay, so if we deal with part A first, what you'll see is that we get really a definition first of this idea of what a competitor is. And don't forget to do that in your opening paragraphs, although you may think that that's fairly obvious. They're looking for a demonstration of knowledge. So what is a competitor? Well, really organizations satisfying the same needs or perhaps make similar products. So same needs or similar products. Okay. Now, why would we undertake competitor analysis? Well, essentially, the key words really there are, strengths and weaknesses of competitors. We need to know what they're up to. And what they specifically talk about there is this idea of, the information provided on strategies, objectives, strengths and weaknesses is absolutely key for any given company, because that will enable a company to decide on its own strategy, its own way of going forward, and indeed how it will react to competitor actions or indeed competitor strategy. Again, our favorite phrase here, they could just about link everything in E2 to this idea of, increasing an organization's competitive advantage. And certainly a good quality analysis of competitors is potentially going to do that, subject to the information that's obtained. Just the other point here on this area, sort of if in doubt, what sort of information are we looking for if we are to do a competitor analysis of some kind? Well, it's more a question of what are we not looking for. We're looking for literally everything that we can find out in relation to our competitors. Sources of information, well, many different sources, not least the internet, databases, and various organizations, perhaps D&B or FAME, that would enable us to really find out a lot of information in relation to our competitors. Okay. This second paragraph, and you'll note that the answers on the CIMA's website are, to a large extent, a little bit of overkill. This is just a repetition, I think, of the first paragraph. They talk about, the analysis will involve finding information on, past, present, and potential future strategies. Of course, it will, and we're looking to again establish an advantage over competitors. Increase our competitive advantage, as they've said above. What will that enable the company to do? Well, potentially forecast returns, obviously decide on potential alternatives in terms of strategic options. So that's a quick summary on really why. In terms of the link, and they often do this, we're unlikely to get a question that doesn't have perhaps at least 2 different parts, particularly if it's on this sort of area. So we're asked why. That's simple enough, and just perhaps linking this into growth and indeed share of the market, maybe a little bit more difficult and perhaps what some students might have found tricky in May 2010. So this second part here, what we're saying essentially is those 2 areas of growth and indeed market share, how do they link into competitor analysis? So they deal with growth first. And what you'll see is that they start from the basics. What indeed does growth mean? Well, really all we're talking about there is sort of demand, over a particular time. So what is the current demand and how is it growing? In this particular case, we're looking at the ice cream market, and certainly knowing how the market is growing over time in terms of sales or by volume or value is important. So they deal with the definition first, and then they sort of link that into, why that's important in terms of the competitor analysis side. And, a couple of good points made here. They say, well, certainly, if we have, let's say, a mature market, which is perhaps not growing at all, it may well be that that is particularly competitive. It may well be that competition can sort of erode profit in that type of market. So, you've got to give the sort of two sides to it. It's either growing or it's not. That's dependent upon the conditions, as they've said. So let's just make a point that the market could be either way, could go either way. Okay. The next point that they make is really in relation to share. What does that mean? Well, if growth means basically the size or indeed the demand over a period of time, certainly share is a part of, or perhaps a percentage of, the whole market. So how is that important in relation to competitor analysis? Well, the company needs to know how much of a share of the market they have, and they can build their strategies from that point. In effect, what we're saying in terms of market share is, as they've mentioned here, it's strength or competitive strength. So really, perhaps, if they have some sort of fairly high market share, then that puts them in a position in relation to their competitors where they can perhaps play some games. For example, in relation to price, it may well be that a high market share means that they have high economies of scale. Therefore, they can influence the market and perhaps put their competitors out of business. So in this particular question, as a summary, it's important that we get the basic definitions in first of growth and share, and then just link it into competitor analysis. In other words, how are these things important? How are they used? Okay, hopefully that's a helpful summary and that this area comes up on the day. Many thanks for listening.